What happens when the most ruthless female billionaire on Wall Street is forced to trade her empire for a husband who buys his groceries on layaway? Victoria Ashford spent 10 years building a logistics dynasty, crushing rivals with a single signature. But when a cruel family ultimatum forces her to marry a destitute mechanic with a 6-year-old daughter just to keep her CEO title, she thinks her life is over. She thinks she's bringing a peasant into her glass castle. She doesn't know that the quiet man fixing her sink is secretly the apex predator of global finance, and he's about to flip her entire world upside down. The boardroom of Ashford Global was 34 floors above Manhattan, a glass box where careers were made and destroyed before the morning coffee went cold. At the head of the long mahogany table sat Victoria Ashford. At 32, she was the youngest female CEO in the Fortune 500. She wore a tailored charcoal Tom Ford suit that looked like armor, her icy blue eyes scanning the quarterly reports with the precision of a hawk. "Bradford Sinclair is making another aggressive push," her CFO muttered, sliding a thick dossier across the table. "He's buying up proxy shares. If we don't secure the merger with the European division, Sinclair's hostile takeover could trigger a board vote by next month." Victoria didn't blink. "Let Bradford play in the sandbox. We are not selling and we are not merging on his terms. Liquidate the underperforming assets in the Midwest and buy back our shares. I want a fortress around this company." She adjourned the meeting, leaving the executives scrambling. But the moment the heavy glass doors sealed behind her, her phone buzzed. It was a private number. "Grandfather," Victoria answered her tone, softening just a fraction, though her posture remained rigid. "My office, now," William Ashford rasped. The patriarch of the Ashford family was 81, tethered to an oxygen tank, but still wielding influence like a sledgehammer. 20 minutes later, Victoria stood in his dimly lit study, surrounded by leather-bound books and the suffocating scent of cigar smoke and old regret. "You're losing your grip on the board, Victoria." William coughed, glaring at her from his wing-back chair. "Sinclair is circling like a vulture. The shareholders want stability. They want to see you anchored." "I am anchored to this company," Victoria fired back. "I tripled our valuation in 3 years." "Valuation isn't legacy." William slammed his cane into the Persian rug. "I hold the controlling 51% of the voting shares in the family trust, and I am transferring them to you on one condition." Victoria's heart stopped. "What condition?" "You will marry. Not Sinclair. Not one of these Wall Street snakes. 25 years ago, a man named James Brooks pulled me from a burning vehicle on the Pacific Coast Highway. I promised him half my fortune. He refused. He died last year in a construction accident, leaving behind a son and a young granddaughter. They are living in poverty in Queens. You will marry the son Elijah Brooks. You will adopt his daughter. You will give them the Ashford protection, and in return, the trust is yours." Victoria laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You're joking. You want me to marry a charity case, a construction worker's son, grandfather. This is corporate suicide. The press will tear us apart." "The papers are drawn," William said coldly, sliding a leather folder onto his desk. "Marry Elijah Brooks by Friday, or I sell my 51% to Bradford Sinclair." The silence in the room was deafening. Victoria looked at the folder, feeling the walls of her empire closing in. She had sacrificed her youth, her personal life, and her peace of mind for Ashford Global. She couldn't let it fall to Sinclair. "Fine," she whispered, her voice venomous. "Where is he?" 2 hours later, Victoria's sleek black Maybach pulled up to a crumbling brick apartment building in the deepest, most neglected pocket of Queens. The street was lined with overflowing dumpsters and rusted cars. A few old men sat on a stoop down the block, nodding at the children running past in the late afternoon sun. Somewhere through an open window, an old Sam Cooke record was playing softly. Victoria stepped out, her Louboutin heels clicking against the cracked pavement, looking utterly alien in her designer suit. Her bodyguard, Reeves, shadowed her closely. She climbed 3 flights of stairs that smelled of stale beer and boiled cabbage, finally stopping at apartment 3B. She knocked. The door creaked open to reveal a man who looked like he had been carved out of exhaustion. Elijah Brooks was tall, broad-shouldered, and covered in engine grease, his dark skin gleaming with the sheen of a long day's labor. He wore a faded gray t-shirt and ripped denim. His close-cropped dark hair framed deep-set striking dark eyes that held an unnerving stillness. A small gold cross hung from a worn chain at his neck, the kind a grandmother might have pressed into a young man's palm with a whispered prayer. He didn't look intimidated by the billionaire standing in his doorway. He just looked tired. "Can I help you?" His voice was a deep, gravelly baritone. "Are you Elijah?" Victoria asked, her nose wrinkling slightly at the smell of motor oil. Before he could answer, a little girl with neatly braided hair, finished with tiny pink and yellow beads at the ends, peeked out from behind his legs. She was missing a front tooth and clutched a battered stuffed rabbit. "Daddy, is she the lady from the TV?" Elijah gently pushed the girl back inside one large hand, smoothing the top of her braids with a tenderness that didn't match the rest of him. "Go watch your cartoons, Maya. Give me a minute." He turned back to Victoria. "Who's asking?" "I am Victoria Ashford, William Ashford's granddaughter." Elijah's expression didn't shift. He wiped his greasy hands on a rag. "William Wright," he said you were coming." "Then you know why I'm here," Victoria said, stepping into the cramped apartment without being invited. The furniture was thrifted. The wallpaper was peeling, but it was obsessively clean. On a side shelf sat two framed photos, one of an older black woman in Sunday church clothes, the other of a younger woman cradling a newborn Maya, both watching over the room like quiet guardians. "Let me make this perfectly clear, Mr. Brooks. This is a transaction. You will sign a prenuptial agreement. You will receive a monthly stipend of $50,000. Your daughter will be placed in the best private school in Manhattan. In exchange, you will pose as my devoted husband in public. You will not interfere with my life, and you will stay out of my way." Elijah leaned against the doorframe, watching her with a calm, piercing gaze that made Victoria inexplicably uncomfortable. Most men cowed before her. Elijah just looked at her like she was a loud, misbehaving bird. $50,000 a month, Elijah repeated, his tone flat. "Is it not enough?" Victoria snapped, pulling out her checkbook. "Name your price." "I don't care. I just need this done." Elijah glanced back into the apartment, his eyes lingering on Maya, who was sitting on a patched-up sofa. A shadow passed over his face, a brief dark flash of something incredibly dangerous before it vanished back into the exhausted mechanic persona. "I don't want your money, Ms. Ashford," Elijah said quietly. "But Maya needs a safe place, a secure place, somewhere with walls higher than this." Victoria frowned, missing the hidden weight in his words. "My penthouse has state-of-the-art security. You'll be fine." "Good," Elijah said. He tossed the grease rag onto a side table. "I'll sign your contract. And here's something worth pausing on for just a moment. How often do we measure a person's worth by the address on their mail?" Victoria looked at peeling wallpaper and saw poverty. She looked at calloused hands and saw weakness. She looked at a black father in a grease-stained shirt and slotted him neatly into the only category her world had taught her to use. But sometimes the strongest fathers are the ones who'd rather hide behind grease and exhaustion than risk the world finding their daughters. And sometimes the most dangerous men alive choose very deliberately to look ordinary. 3 days later, the marriage was finalized in a sterile 5-minute courthouse ceremony. Victoria wore a white business suit. Elijah wore a cheap, ill-fitting rental tuxedo. The only witness was William's lawyer. That evening, Elijah and Maya moved into Victoria's sprawling 10,000-square-foot penthouse overlooking Central Park. "These are your quarters," Victoria said, gesturing to the east wing of the apartment. "Maya's room is next to yours. I sleep in the west wing. We do not cross paths after 9 p.m. The kitchen is shared, but I have a private chef who prepares my meals. If you need anything, speak to my assistant." Maya was spinning in circles in the massive marble foyer, her braids and beads clicking softly as she twirled her eyes wide. "Daddy, the floor is super shiny. You can slide in your socks." Elijah smiled, a genuine warm expression that momentarily transformed his rough face. "Careful, Bug. Don't break anything." He looked at Victoria. "Thank you for the space." "It's a contract," she replied coldly, turning on her heel. "Remember the rules." For the first 2 weeks, they lived like ghosts haunting the same mansion. Victoria worked grueling 18-hour days fighting off Bradford Sinclair's relentless corporate sabotage. Her shipping lines in the Pacific were suddenly tied up in bureaucratic red tape, costing her millions daily. The stress was eating her alive. There's something quietly heartbreaking about two people sharing the same roof and the same silence. Victoria had built her empire on the belief that distance equals power. But as she lay awake those nights, hearing Maya's tiny laughter echo through marble halls, hearing Elijah's low, steady voice reading bedtime stories 2 wings away, she began to wonder. Was the distance she demanded protecting her, or was it just another wall she'd built around a life that had no one in it? And maybe that's the first quiet lesson tucked inside this story. We so often look at someone's hands, their clothes, their neighborhood, and decide we already know them. But the truest measure of a person isn't their zip code or their bank account. It's how they hold their child's hand when they think no one is watching. It's the way a father patiently parts and braids his daughter's hair before sunrise beads clicking like a soft prayer. Don't be too quick to label the quiet ones. The ones who carry the most are usually the ones who say the least. She began noticing odd things about her new husband. Despite the $50,000 monthly stipend she deposited into an account for him, Elijah never touched it. He still woke up at 5 a.m., but instead of going to a garage, he made breakfast for Maya, packed her lunch for her new elite private school, and spent hours sitting on the balcony with a cheap burner phone and a worn leather notebook. Every morning before the sun was fully up, Victoria could hear the soft, patient sound of Elijah redoing Maya's braids, the quiet hum of an old gospel tune under his breath, the gentle, "Hold still, baby girl," as he worked. One evening, Victoria came home early, nursing a massive migraine. Her deal with Helix Industries, a massive semiconductor manufacturer, had fallen through. Sinclair had outbid her, bribing the Helix executives. She walked into the kitchen and stopped. The private chef was gone. Instead, Elijah was standing at the industrial stove stirring a pot of homemade tomato soup. The smell of something else drifted from the oven, something rich baked, the kind of comfort food that smelled like a grandmother's kitchen. He wore a simple black t-shirt that stretched tightly over his back. "Chef is off today," Elijah said without turning around. "Maya wanted grilled cheese. There's enough if you want some. Made my mama's mac and cheese too, in case you change your mind about carbs." "I don't eat carbs," Victoria muttered, dropping her briefcase onto the marble island. She rubbed her temples. "And I don't have time to eat. Helix Industries just pulled out of our supply chain agreement. We're bleeding capital." Elijah slowly turned down the heat on the stove. "Helix, the Seattle branch." Victoria laughed bitterly. "Yes, the Seattle branch. Not that you would understand. It's corporate politics, Elijah. Not a broken carburetor." Elijah didn't react to the insult. He just plated a grilled cheese sandwich, cut off the crust for Maya, and set it on the counter. Corporate politics usually comes down to leverage. Who's the CEO of Helix? Gregory Stone. Gregory Whitmore. Victoria corrected, too tired to care why he was asking. "He's in Bradford Sinclair's pocket." "Right. Whitmore," Elijah murmured. He wiped his hands on a towel. "Excuse me, I need to make a quick call. Checking in on my old boss at the garage." Elijah walked out onto the freezing terrace, sliding the glass door shut behind him. He pulled the cheap burner phone from his pocket. The moment the glass door sealed, his posture changed. The tired, slumping mechanic vanished. His spine straightened, his shoulders squared, and his dark eyes turned cold and predatory. He dialed a 12-digit encrypted number. It was answered on the first ring. "Sir." A crisp British voice spoke. "Reginald." Elijah said his voice, dropping an octave into a low, terrifying register. "I need you to pull the leverage file on Gregory Whitmore at Helix. Right away, Mr. Crown." "Ah, Yes. We hold the debt on his offshore gambling accounts in Monaco, roughly 40 million in arrears. We also have the satellite photos of his undocumented meetings with the Regulatory Commission. Call him, Elijah commanded softly, watching the Manhattan skyline. Tell him EB Crown is displeased. Tell him if he doesn't sign the exclusive supply chain contract with Ashford Global by 8 a.m. Tomorrow, I will personally liquidate his life. He will be begging for pennies on the street. Understood, sir. Shall I also make a move on Bradford Sinclair? Not yet. Elijah said, his eyes narrowing as he looked through the glass at Victoria, who was massaging her temples in the kitchen. Let Sinclair play his hand a little longer. I want to see his entire network before I burn it to the ground. Yes, Mr. Crown. How is Miss Maya? She's safe, Elijah said, his voice softening slightly. The Ashford penthouse is a fortress. Whoever put the hit out on Naomi hasn't tracked us here. Maintaining the cover is our top priority. Very good, sir. Elijah hung up. He took a deep breath, letting the terrifying aura of the world's most powerful shadow billionaire bleed away, replacing it with the docile, quiet mechanic. He walked back inside. Garage is doing fine, he told Victoria. The next morning, Victoria was jolted awake by her phone ringing frantically. It was her CFO. Victoria, turn on CNBC now! Victoria scrambled for the remote. The news ticker at the bottom of the screen was flashing red. Breaking: Helix Industries reverses decision overnight. Signs exclusive with Ashford Global. CEO Gregory Whitmore cites unforeseen strategic alignments. Victoria sat in bed, utterly paralyzed. Below market, Whitmore hated her. Why would he suddenly hand her the deal of a lifetime? She walked out into the living room in a daze. Elijah was sitting on the rug, letting Maya put pink butterfly hair clips along the edge of his close-cropped hair. He was humming something low, an old soul tune Victoria half recognized from her grandfather's record collection. He looked ridiculous. He looked completely harmless. Morning, Elijah said, perfectly deadpan, a pink butterfly clipped to his temple. Coffee's in the pot. Victoria stared at him, then at the news on her iPad. It had to be a coincidence. It was the only logical explanation. 2 months into the arrangement, the facade of their marriage was put to the ultimate test, the Ashford Annual Charity Gala. It was the social event of the season, a snake pit of billionaires, politicians, and socialites. You don't have to speak, Victoria instructed Elijah as they rode down in the private elevator. She was wearing a breathtaking emerald green silk gown that clung to her curves, a fortune in diamonds resting on her collarbone. Elijah wore a bespoke black tuxedo that Victoria had ordered for him. When he had stepped out of his room, Victoria had literally stopped breathing for a second. The tailored lines of the suit clung to his broad chest and narrow waist. With his hair freshly cut, his beard neatly trimmed into a clean, sharp line along his jaw, and the small gold cross tucked just beneath his collar, he didn't look like a mechanic. He looked like a king who had simply chosen for his own reasons to walk among ordinary men. It unnerved her deeply. Just smile, nod, and let me do the talking, she continued, regaining her composure. Sinclair will be there. He will try to provoke you. He wants to prove to the board that my marriage is a sham and that I'm mentally unstable for marrying a working-class man. I've dealt with bullies before, Elijah said, mildly adjusting his cuffs. Not bullies like Bradford Sinclair. He destroys lives for sport. The ballroom at the Plaza Hotel was glittering with crystal chandeliers and overflowing with orchids. The moment Victoria and Elijah entered the room, went silent. Flashbulbs erupted. Whispers cascaded through the crowd like a wave. That's him. The charity case, I heard she found him living in a dumpster. He cleans up well, but look at his hands. Calloused. Victoria kept her chin high, her arm looped stiffly through Elijah's. To his credit, Elijah was a rock. His heart rate, which she could feel against her arm, was terrifyingly slow and steady, the kind of calm that comes from a man who has spent his whole life walking into rooms where people decide who he is, before he opens his mouth. Halfway through the evening, the confrontation Victoria dreaded finally happened. Bradford Sinclair, holding a crystal tumbler of scotch, swaggered over with two of his sycophant executives. "Victoria, darling," Sinclair purred, his eyes raking over her body before dismissing Elijah entirely. "You look spectacular, though I must admit I'm surprised you brought the help to such a sophisticated event." Victoria's eyes flashed. "Bradford, leave." "Oh, come now. I just want to meet the lucky man." Sinclair finally turned his gaze to Elijah, a sneer playing on his lips. "Elijah, is it? I hear you fix cars. Fascinating. Tell me, do you even know what a derivative is, or do you just know how to change a tire?" The executive snickered. Victoria stepped forward, fury rising in her throat, but Elijah gently placed a hand on her waist, stopping her. Elijah looked at Sinclair. For the first time since Victoria had met him, Elijah didn't look tired. His dark eyes locked onto Sinclair's with an intensity that seemed to drop the temperature in the room. "I know enough," Elijah said, his voice quiet, smooth and dangerously calm. Sinclair chuckled, sipping his scotch. "Is that right? You know my driver's Bentley has been making a rattling noise. Maybe I can slip you $100 to take a look under the hood later?" Elijah didn't blink. He reached out his calloused fingers, slowly plucking the crystal tumbler of scotch right out of Sinclair's hand. He did it so smoothly, so authoritatively, that Sinclair was too stunned to resist. Elijah swirled the expensive liquid, looking at it thoughtfully. Then he took a step closer to Sinclair, invading his personal space. "A derivative, Bradford," Elijah said softly, so only Victoria and Sinclair could hear, "is a financial contract whose value is reliant upon an underlying asset. Much like how your company's current stock valuation is entirely reliant on the fabricated Q3 earnings report you filed 2 weeks ago in the Cayman Islands." Sinclair's smug smile vanished instantly. The color completely drained from his face, leaving him looking like a sick ghost. "How?" Sinclair stammered, his eyes darting around in panic. "Who told you?" "I also know," Elijah continued, his voice barely a whisper, yet carrying the weight of an executioner's blade, "that you leveraged your own mother's estate to cover your margin calls last Tuesday. If the SEC were to receive an anonymous tip regarding the offshore accounts you've hidden under a shell company in Belize, you wouldn't just lose your company. You'd go to federal prison for 20 years. Elijah gently pressed the glass back into Sinclair's trembling hand. "Fix your own Bentley, Bradford." Elijah smiled, a cold, empty expression. "And stay away from my wife." Sinclair looked terrified. He didn't say another word. He practically sprinted away, abandoning his executives, desperate to get out of the ballroom. Victoria stood frozen, her mind spinning wildly. She stared at Elijah, who had already gone back to looking at the hors d'oeuvres table with mild interest. "What did you just say to him?" Victoria demanded, grabbing his arm and pulling him into a quiet alcove behind a pillar. Sinclair looked like he was going to vomit. "What did you say?" "I just told him a joke I heard at the garage." Elijah shrugged innocently. "Don't lie to me," she hissed. Her eyes darted down to the hand holding her arm. For the first time, she really looked at it. Yes, there were calluses, but they weren't haphazard. They were precise, like someone who practiced martial arts, not someone who slipped wrenches. And then she saw the watch. Part of her agreement was buying him a wardrobe, but he had insisted on wearing his own watch. She had assumed it was some cheap knockoff, but under the bright chandelier light, she recognized the intricate hand-painted dial and the specific flawless rotation of the gears. It was a Patek Philippe Grandmaster chime, but not just any model. It was the prototype, a watch that was rumored to have been sold at a secret auction in Geneva to an anonymous buyer for $31 million. "Elijah," Victoria breathed, her heart hammering against her ribs as she looked up into his calm, unreadable eyes. "Who exactly are you?" Here's a thought worth sitting with for just a moment. The wealthiest people in the world rarely look the part. The ones with nothing left to prove don't need to prove it. And the ones who have lost the most, they often choose to disappear into the most ordinary corners of life where grief feels less suffocating because no one knows to look for it there. Victoria had spent her career reading balance sheets and body language, but she had missed the one detail that mattered most. The man in front of her was not hiding because he was small. He was hiding because he was enormous. And so we land at the end of the second act, and there's a soft thing worth saying out loud here. Patience tends to reveal what arrogance never sees. Victoria spent 2 months underestimating the man making her daughter, well, his daughter, pancakes. And the moment she finally looked closely, the world tilted on its axis. So if there's someone in your life you've been quick to dismiss, a quiet coworker, a tired neighbor, a parent doing twice the work for half the credit, consider this your gentle nudge. Look again. Listen longer. Sometimes the people we overlook are carrying entire universes inside them, and the only thing standing between us and that revelation is our own willingness to slow down. The morning after the gala, the atmosphere in the penthouse was thick enough to choke on. Victoria sat at the marble kitchen island, her untouched espresso cooling rapidly. She watched Elijah. He was at the stove again, wearing a faded gray Henley, flipping blueberry pancakes for Maya. He looked entirely domestic, completely unbothered. But Victoria wasn't fooled anymore. She had spent the entire night tearing through the internet, making calls to her most discreet fixers. She had hired Spencer Hayes, a former MI6 operative who now ran corporate intelligence for Wall Street's elite. Spencer had called her at 4 a.m. His voice had been laced with a rare, genuine panic. "Victoria, call off the search," Spencer had warned. "Elijah Brooks doesn't exist. The Social Security number was generated 3 years ago. His work history is a shell, but whoever built his ghost profile is using military-grade encryption. When I tried to dig into the vehicle accident that supposedly killed his father, my servers were hit by a retaliatory cyber attack. It wiped my hard drives in 60 seconds. You are sleeping next to a ghost, Victoria. A very dangerous one." Now she watched the ghost pour syrup onto a plate. "Did you sleep well?" Elijah asked, bringing the plate to Maya, who was busy coloring in a book. "Not really," Victoria said, her voice tight. "I was too busy thinking about horology, specifically $30 million Patek Philippe prototypes." Elijah paused, the spatula resting lightly in his hand. He didn't look at her, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "It's a replica. I bought it at a pawn shop on the Lower East Side for $50. "Don't insult my intelligence," Victoria snapped, standing up. "You terrified Bradford Sinclair into submission with a whisper. You possess knowledge of offshore Cayman accounts that even my billion-dollar intelligence division couldn't find. And Spencer Hayes tells me you don't exist." Elijah finally turned to face her. The warm, fatherly facade stripped away instantly, revealing the cold, calculating predator beneath. "Spencer Hayes is sloppy. He left a digital footprint the size of Texas when he tried to breach the Pentagon's back doors looking for my military records. You should fire him." Victoria's breath hitched. "Who are you?" Before Elijah could answer, Victoria's phone erupted. It was Reeves, her head of security. She answered it, keeping her eyes locked on Elijah. "Ms. Ashford, we have a code red," Reeves yelled over the sound of screeching tires. "Sinclair has lost his mind. His margin calls hit this morning. He's completely bankrupt. He's hired a private tactical firm, Mercenaries. They just breached the lobby of the Ashford building. They're looking for the ledger drives you keep in the penthouse safe. They're coming up the private elevator right now." Victoria's blood ran cold. "The penthouse, Reeves, Maya is here." "I'm locked out of the system. They bypassed the biometric scanners. Get out of there, Victoria, now!" The line went dead. Victoria dropped the phone, panic seizing her chest. "Sinclair sent mercenaries. They're coming up the elevator. We have to get to the panic room." She lunged toward Maya, but Elijah was already moving. He didn't look panicked. He looked furious. The kind of quiet, apocalyptic fury that precedes a natural disaster. "Maya bug," Elijah said smoothly, his voice betraying absolutely no fear. "Grab your coloring book. We're going to play the quiet game in the big metal closet." "Okay, Daddy," Maya chirped, grabbing her crayons, the beads in her braids clicking softly. Elijah ushered them both into the reinforced steel panic room hidden behind the library bookshelf. As Victoria stepped inside, she turned back to him. "Elijah, come on. I'll be right there," he said softly. He pulled a matte black suppressed Heckler & Koch USP tactical pistol from beneath the false bottom of a nearby umbrella stand. Victoria stared at the weapon, her mind short-circuiting. "Lock the door," Elijah commanded. "Do not open it until I say the word Phoenix." He slammed the heavy steel door shut, plunging Victoria and Maya into the dimly lit, soundproof room. Victoria watched through the small bulletproof glass viewport. The private elevator chimed, the polished steel doors slid open, and 4 men in heavy tactical gear stepped into the foyer. They were armed with compact submachine guns, moving with terrifying military precision. But they were stepping into a slaughterhouse. Elijah didn't hide. He stood in the center of the vast living room, a solitary figure in a gray Henley. The mercenaries raised their weapons, but Elijah was impossibly fast. He moved with a brutal kinetic efficiency. 2 suppressed shots echoed through the glass, taking out the knee of the first man and the shoulder of the second before they could even pull their triggers. The remaining 2 opened fire, shattering the floor-to-ceiling windows and shredding the million-dollar artwork. Elijah rolled behind the marble island, returning fire with lethal accuracy. It wasn't a firefight, it was a clinical dismantling. Within 45 seconds, all 4 men were incapacitated, writhing on the floor, groaning in agony. Elijah walked over to the leader, kicking his weapon away. He knelt down, pressing the searing hot suppressor of his pistol against the man's neck. The man screamed. "Who gave the order?" Elijah whispered. "Sinclair," the man choked out. "He said if we didn't get the ledgers, we were supposed to take the kid, hold her for ransom." Through the glass, Victoria saw Elijah's posture go rigid. The atmosphere shifted from defensive to entirely murderous. Take a breath here for just a moment. Because what was happening in that room wasn't really about money or power or revenge. It was about a father who'd already buried one love and would burn the entire world before burying another. There's a particular kind of strength that lives in single fathers, and in black single fathers especially, who have spent generations being underestimated, overlooked, asked to be twice as much for half the recognition, told their tenderness is a weakness and their power is a threat. Elijah had simply taken a lifetime of being underestimated and forged it into the sharpest weapon Wall Street had never seen coming. Suddenly, the shattered glass doors of the terrace blew open. 6 men in impeccably tailored dark suits rappelled down from the roof, securing the room in seconds. They weren't police. They moved like elite Secret Service. A tall, distinguished man with silver hair and a British accent stepped over the broken glass. It was Reginald. "Perimeter secure, sir," Reginald said, bowing slightly to Elijah. "The local authorities have been diverted. A cleanup crew is en route. Shall I send a team to extract Mr. Sinclair?" "No," Elijah said, his voice echoing with absolute authority. "Bring him to the Ashford boardroom. I want him breathing when I get there." Elijah turned, walked to the panic room, and tapped on the glass. "Phoenix." Victoria opened the door, her hands shaking violently. She stepped out, shielding Maya's eyes from the blood on the marble floor. Reginald immediately stepped forward, gently taking Maya's hand. "Ms. Maya, shall we go look at the helicopters on the roof?" Once Maya was gone, Victoria turned to her husband. The grease-stained mechanic was dead. Standing before her was a king. "My name is not Elijah Brooks," he said quietly, holstering the weapon. "My name is Elijah Bennett Crown. I am the founder and sole proprietor of EB Crown Holdings." Victoria's knees nearly buckled. EB Crown was a ghost entity. It was the white whale of Wall Street, a sovereign wealth fund so massive it dictated the GDP of small nations. It was the invisible hand that moved global markets, funded revolutions, and owned the debts of half the Fortune 500. It was rumored to be run by a ruthless, reclusive trillionaire who had never been photographed. "You," Victoria whispered, her voice trembling. "Your crown. You own the banks that own my banks." "Yes," Elijah said. "Why?" Victoria demanded, tears of shock pricking her eyes. Why pretend to be a mechanic? Why live in a slum? Why marry me for $50,000 a month when you could buy Manhattan with a stroke of a pen? Elijah's eyes darkened with a profound, suffocating grief. Because 3 years ago, a Russian syndicate tried to assassinate me to erase a sovereign debt. They missed me. They hit my wife Naomi's car instead. Victoria gasped, covering her mouth. I buried my wife in a closed casket. Elijah continued, his voice cold and hollow. The syndicate was hunting for Maya to finish the bloodline, so I erased us. I scrubbed my identity, took my daughter to the poorest neighborhood in Queens, and covered myself in engine grease. I figured the world would never look twice at another tired black father pulling double shifts in a forgotten corner of the city. I made our invisibility into our armor. Crown operated from the shadows through Reginald. But my grandfather, Victoria stammered, the will, the ultimatum. William knew, Elijah said. William Ashford was one of my earliest mentors. When he learned the syndicate was closing in on my location in Queens, he offered me a solution, the ultimate cover. Who would ever look for the phantom trillionaire of global finance hiding in plain sight as the pathetic charity case husband of the most famous, heavily guarded female CEO in America? Victoria realized the sheer brilliance of it. The blinding spotlight of her celebrity was the perfect shadow for him to hide in. He forced the marriage to protect you, Victoria realized. But why did he threaten to give the company to Sinclair if I refused? Because William knew you needed protection too. Elijah stepped closer, his dark eyes burning into hers. He knew Sinclair was plotting a hostile takeover. He knew Sinclair was dangerous. William didn't just give me a place to hide Victoria. He gave you a sword. He gave you me. 2 hours later, the boardroom of Ashford Global was dead silent. The panoramic windows overlooked a city that was oblivious to the tectonic shift in power occurring high above it. Bradford Sinclair was strapped to a leather chair at the end of the long mahogany table, his face bruised, his clothes torn. He was hyperventilating, surrounded by Reginald's elite guards. The double doors swung open. Victoria walked in wearing a sharp crimson designer suit looking like an empress. But it was the man walking beside her who made Sinclair whimper. Elijah wore a bespoke charcoal three-piece suit that radiated authority. The Patek Philippe gleamed on his wrist. He was no longer the mechanic. He was the apex predator, and he was finally off his leash. Victoria took her seat at the head of the table. Elijah didn't sit. He walked slowly around the table, stopping directly behind Sinclair. You sent armed men into a home where my daughter was sleeping, Elijah said. The volume of his voice was low, but it rattled the glass of the boardroom windows. I didn't know. Sinclair sobbed, sweat pouring down his face. I swear to God, Brooks, I thought you were just a grease monkey. I just wanted the ledgers. I didn't know. My name is Crown, Elijah corrected softly. Sinclair stopped breathing. His eyes bugged out of his head, darting wildly between Victoria and the man standing behind him. Crown, no. No, that's impossible. Crown is a myth. Elijah leaned down, resting his hands on the back of Sinclair's chair. Reginald, run the protocol. Reginald stepped forward with a tablet. Executing, sir. Bradford, Elijah whispered into Sinclair's ear. As of 30 seconds ago, EB Crown Holdings has initiated a hostile buyout of every single one of your corporate debts. We have frozen your offshore accounts, liquidated your real estate portfolios, and submitted your encrypted emails detailing your embezzlement to the Department of Justice. Sinclair began to weep hysterically. Please, I'll give you everything. I'll sign the company over to Ashford Global. Just don't destroy me. You're already destroyed, Victoria said coldly from the head of the table. You're just waiting for the concrete to hit you. The FBI is currently raiding your offices downstairs, Elijah added, checking his prototype watch. You have about 4 minutes before they come up here to arrest you. I suggest you use that time to pray. Elijah nodded to Reginald, who hauled the blubbering Sinclair out of the boardroom to meet the federal agents. When the doors closed, leaving them alone, the heavy, suffocating tension in the room slowly dissipated. Victoria leaned back in her leather chair, exhausted, exhilarated, and utterly overwhelmed. She looked down at the massive table. "So," Victoria breathed, breaking the silence, "the mechanic is a trillionaire. The marriage was a tactical alliance, and my grandfather is the greatest chess player on earth." Elijah walked over to the head of the table, stopping beside her chair. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a folded piece of heavy parchment. He tossed it onto the table. It was their prenuptial agreement, the contract that dictated they live as ghosts, separated by wings of a penthouse. "The Russian syndicate that killed Naomi," Elijah said quietly. "Reginald located their leadership an hour ago. They've been dismantled. The threat is gone. I don't need to hide anymore." Victoria looked at the prenup, then up at his striking dark eyes. "Which means our contract is fulfilled. You have your freedom. You and Maya can go back to your real lives." A strange, painful knot tightened in Victoria's chest. For the last 2 months, she had grown accustomed to the quiet presence in her home. The smell of homemade dinner, the soft hum of gospel and old soul records floating from the kitchen, the sight of Maya running across the marble floors with her beads clicking the grounding stability of a man who didn't care about her money. She realized with a sudden jolt of clarity that she didn't want the ghost to leave. Elijah reached out his calloused fingers, gently resting on the edge of the prenuptial agreement. "I've spent the last 3 years in the dark Victoria building walls trusting no one. I married you because it was a strategic imperative." He slowly tore the contract in half. "But standing in that penthouse today," Elijah continued, his voice losing its cold edge, replaced by a raw, burning intensity. "Watching you step in front of my daughter to protect her from armed men, I realized something. You didn't just give me a place to hide. You gave us a home. You looked at a man covered in grease with a little girl and beads in her hair, and instead of seeing a problem, you slowly started seeing a family." Victoria stood up slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was a billionaire CEO. She crushed rivals for breakfast. But standing inches from this man, she felt entirely defenseless. "You told me once," Elijah murmured, his hand moving from the torn contract to gently trace the line of her jaw, "that this was corporate politics. A transaction." "I was wrong," Victoria whispered, leaning into his touch. "Good," Elijah said, a slow, breathtaking smile finally crossing his face. "Because I don't want to be your business partner, Victoria. I want to be your husband." He leaned in, and when his lips met hers, it wasn't a transaction. It was an absolute world-tilting surrender. It was the colliding of 2 empires, a fusion of power and passion that sent a shockwave through her entire being. Victoria grabbed the lapels of his suit, pulling him closer, anchoring herself to the most powerful man in the world, who also happened to braid his daughter's hair every morning and make excellent blueberry pancakes. 6 months later, the boardroom of Ashford Global was once again filled with executives. But the atmosphere was radically different. There was no fear, no talk of hostile takeovers. Victoria stood at the head of the table, projecting the quarterly earnings. They hadn't just tripled, they had shattered global records. Merging the logistics infrastructure of Ashford Global with the infinite capital of EB Crown had created an unstoppable financial leviathan. The heavy glass doors swung open. Elijah walked in, carrying Maya on his shoulders. Maya was wearing a tiny custom-made suit that matched her mother's, her braids, freshly redone that morning with new gold and pearl beads, holding a stuffed rabbit in one hand and a stock portfolio in the other. "Sorry we're late," Elijah smiled, setting Maya down. He walked over to Victoria, pressing a kiss to her temple in front of the entire stunned board of directors. "Someone insisted on stopping for ice cream before the board meeting." "Ice cream is good for brain power, Daddy," Maya announced, climbing into a leather chair next to Victoria. Victoria looked at the executives, then at her daughter, and yes, somewhere along the way, Maya had become her daughter too, and finally at the man who had flipped her entire world upside down. She smiled a genuine, radiant smile that no amount of money could ever buy. "Let's continue the meeting." Victoria said, her voice ringing with absolute confidence. "We have an empire to run." What a wild, heart-pounding journey from a forced marriage built on a cold corporate contract to the ultimate revelation of explosive power and undeniable romance. Victoria thought she was sacrificing her life for her company, only to discover that the quiet, grease-stained single dad she brought into her home was the very king of the financial underworld. Together, they didn't just defeat their enemies. They built an unstoppable empire and a beautiful, loving family. And here at the very end is the quiet truth this whole story has been pointing at all along. Love is not a contract. Family is not a transaction. Empires can be built and lost overnight, but the people who sit at your kitchen table, the ones who remember how you take your coffee, who pack your child's lunch, who patiently braid little hairs at sunrise, who climb into the leather chair next to you in a boardroom where they very much belong. Those are the only riches that compound over time. Whatever you're chasing today, ask yourself this: is there a Maya in your life? Is there an Elijah? A quiet someone you've maybe walked past, underestimated, mislabeled? And if there is, are you seeing them clearly, or are you waiting for some dramatic revelation to remind you what you already have? You don't need $1 billion and a hostile takeover to find that out. You just need the willingness to look at the people in front of you with softer eyes. If you loved this intense story of hidden identities, billion-dollar betrayals, and true love conquering all, you do not want to miss what we have coming next. Please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that the quiet ones often carry the most, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling, dramatic stories every single week. Let us know in the comments what you thought of Elijah's ultimate revenge and what part of his story moved you the most.